Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a retrospective look back at a build that I did in 2012, which meant an awful lot to me and was actually my personal system for over 5 years, and that is the Orca build. Now, just recently, Asus come to me and they give me a heads up about a competition that they're going to be doing for their 30th anniversary. And they said to me, have you got any old, what they wanted to use the term durable Asus kit lying around, because it's not it's not hidden, do you know what I mean? I am an old hardware collector and I collect all the brands, but I do have an awful lot of Asus stuff, especially I keep hold of all my old, like the boards that I use for CPU reviews. I use the same motherboard for all the CPUs, for example. So I do get to keep a lot of those, and I like to keep hold of them so that if I ever have to go back and recheck, I still got them. And for argument's sake, I've got an original Rampage Extreme here, which is an X48 socket, 775 CPU. Did loads of CPU reviews with this one. This is an old original Crosshair Formula. This is an old Striker Extreme back from when Nvidia used to make chipsets. I still own my own personal, the first Asus board I ever bought, which is a P5K Premium. And I've still got my E6600 CPUs and my E6850 CPU. And with that E6850, actually, I had that, this is going to surprise some of you newcomers, but we used to have a thing called front side bus. And I had that running at 525 front side bus with an 8 times multiplier. Back then, flipping heck, that might have been like 2010, I can't remember, but it was 4.2 gigahertz I had back then, and that was back in the days of DDR2 as well. DDR2 memory, that is. But anyway, so Asus come to me and said about durable hardware. Now, the single rig that I've used for the longest amount of time was Orca. And I had decommissioned her, but it literally all I'd had the heart to do was to take her off my desk, and I'd covered her up and I'd put her in the loft because I never wanted to sell or get rid of her because of what it stood for, where it was a memorial to my mum. So when Asus said about that, it then seemed fitting, and I had wanted to find the time to do it for such a long time. I completely stripped the rig. I took it all apart, and it's all the original hardware, but it's just got new coolant and hose now, and I redid all the wiring to try and make everything tidy and everything again. But it's all stemmed around a Rampage 4 Extreme, which held my 3970X overclock at 5 gigahertz for about 4 years, I think. Now, you might think to yourself that, you know, holding an overclock for a long period of time doesn't sound like that big a deal, but we're talking back in the days when, you know, 6 cores and 12 threads was still a really new thing. And the CPU wanted 1.44 volts. For 5 gigahertz, but it only had a 48 multiplier, but then I'd used 104.3 base clock to be able to get it up to that hallowed 5 gigahertz mark. And the other thing that you should remember is this was my working desktop system. This is the video that has rendered more videos for my YouTube channel than any other rig that I've ever used. So the amount of videos that got rendered through this at 5 gigahertz were just immense. And I remember kind of like when the BIOS, even like now, if you look back at it, it almost looks alien because it's so pixelated. But if you think about it, it's a long time ago. But I took that opportunity anyway, and I completely stripped the entire system apart. I took the CPU block apart and cleaned all inside, although it wasn't too bad. And the Rampage has actually got a full set of motherboard blocks as well. So there's a chipset block that comes down and it loops around, so it comes out of the CPU into the top of a chipset block and then goes and loops down and all around. Had a VRM block at the top as well. Now the fans are just above the top of the motherboard itself, but it was one of those ones where I was going for a quite low fan speed, so the fans that are in it are running at 650 RPM. They're the original SP120 fans that are in there. And there's a 360mm radiator at the top with push-pull fans on either side, but a very low RPM. Like I said, they're fixed RPMs. I never really liked them ramping up and stuff. I know it's strange, but it's just the way that I did it. And the same in the front. It's a 360mm radiator, but 80mm thick. Now that's alpha cool stuff. The graphics cards that are in there, they're actually 7970, so they're a pair of AMD graphics cards, Asus AMD graphics cards, in Crossfire and it's back in the days when we used to have flexible crossfire bridges. I think that was an upgrade. The original one would have been one of the original AMD gold ones. But anyway, so they're a pair of Asus ones. They're only reference design cards because this was back in the days where like you had to have reference design to be able to get water blocks. And I think it's, yeah, they're all Coolants blocks. I had a little bit of a brain fart then. But anyway, I didn't actually overclock the graphics cards. And to be honest with you, I'm not much of a gamer. I do the odd kind of like drive-in sim and stuff like that. But for me, it was, when I do something like this, it's all about the hardware and the overclocking, which is why I did push the overclock on this thing so hard. Now, never lost the overclock on it as well. And something else which a lot of people will find kind of like amusing is the fact that if I was to spin the system round, there's a pair of hard drives in the back. Now, they're Corsair Force GTs. I don't think they're the 3 ones. No, they're the Force GTs, and they're 480 gigabytes. Now, back in 2012, those hard drives were over $1,000 each. Now, both those hard drives are in a RAID configuration, direct to the Rampage motherboard, and they were in RAID the entire time that I was using it. And when I rebuilt the system, after it had been sat for such a long time, rebuilt the system, plugged it all in, literally went into the BIOS and made sure all the RAID settings were still kind of turned on and it was all still there, pressed power up for the first time and it literally all come to life, jumped into Windows, all of my old document things were there, it was showing me ancient emails, it was literally like a blast from the past. But anyway, so with the actual case itself, I stripped the entire case down. I then drilled out all of the rivets, I put the entire case back together with all nuts and bolts, and they've got stainless steel red washers as well. The black bolts are stainless as well, but then blacked, and normally they're a mild steel, but I didn't want the chance of them ever going rusty, so they're all stainless steel bolts. It's the original D5 pump that's in there. The coolant is fresh, which I will thank Mick from Mayhems for making. It's a custom XT1 coolant that's in it now. But it's got a lot more black dye in it. It's not something that he wanted to do for like a shop thing, but I just explained to him that I wanted to redo this and I wanted it to be jet black, like oil slick black. And he knocked it up for me custom. So big thank you to Mick for that one. The fittings that were in it, I actually went to Vincent from Bits Power, maybe at the beginning of 2011, it might have been a little bit earlier, and asked for some, you know, what was the possibility of white fittings. And I think it took about 18 months to 2 years to get the coating on the white fittings correct so that it didn't keep flaking off or going yellow. Now, he didn't make them specifically for me. I think it was been something that had been asked a few times, but the fact that I got one of the original batches of the white before they went public meant an awful lot to me. And I think it really did help make the system stand out that little bit more back in the day as well. Corsair power supply. It was originally an AX860. That's actually in a system still here being used because this is original stuff that literally like... I didn't want to take it out of the rig that we're using it in at the moment, so we grabbed the 860 and put it in, but it had an RM power supply in it at one point in time, just because the RM was incredibly quieter. I mean, this fan is passive, but it was when it was spinning up at the first boot, it was starting to wind me up a bit. Corsair Dominator Platinum memory, I think that's 2666 megahertz as well. That was what originally went in there. I did change tops and stuff over time to play around with it, but it really has gone back to the original spec. Cooler Master Storm Striker case. Now, they did do the Trooper, but that was black, and they weren't allowed to call this one the Trooper because it was black and white. There was issues with Star Wars, so this is why this one was called the Striker back in the day. I did a custom mod on the roof as well because the handle's normally really enclosed, but where I'd custom mounted the 360mm rad in the roof, had to cut the handle away so I had better airflow. And you should also have a big hard drive bay down here or an optical bay drive, because these are all, could be all optical bays if you wanted, or you could put anything in there that went in a 5 1/4 inch drive. And I cut all of that out, put false floors in, stuff in the back. Also on the back of the case as well, I've shown you the hard drives already, but on the back it's actually kind of nice to see that the way the hard drives are mounted around the back, and that was just so that they fit just inside of those vents. And the idea with the vents is you could have them blowing left and right, but I put the hard drives there to make a feature of them, because obviously back in the day they were worth so much money, it seemed a shame to just hide them away. But one thing that I will say with this rig is it's still working to this date. The overclock is still in place. It's still, the pump is all still working, you know, everything still works. All of the memory channels are still there. The RAID is still there. It has been incredibly durable. But for me, it wasn't really about that with Orca. It moved on from just being a rig and taken on a lot more. I mean, every morning when I used to switch, you know, hit the power button, I'd say good morning to my mum. And that it kind of took on more of a soul for me. And I think if the motherboard had let me down, I'd had to keep swapping parts out, or graphics cards had died, or anything like that, I think it might not have meant so much, because it would have been, you know, you were constantly kind of maintain it and look after it and do all that sort of stuff. And the fact that it had been so faultless over time, which is why I thought it would be really nice to give the old girl a clean and then one last video. Now don't forget, there is a link underneath. You can go to the and enter this competition yourself. Maybe not spend as much time making the video as I did, and by that I mean don't talk as much as I did. But if you've got any really nice stories, if you've got any amazingly durable hardware, this could be one for you overclockers out there when you think about it. Those of you that have frozen your, you know, X48 Rampage so many times, and you've got this many world records, and you've got so many photos of it covered in frost, yet it still works. This is right up your street. Or even like me, you've covered it in water cooling, you've played thousands of hours of games on it, and you've changed your mouse and your keyboard and maybe even your monitor multiple times, but you've still battering that same motherboard and CPU, for example. It's a chance for you to kind of stand up and show, let's face it, how much we like our kit. So if that sounds like something you would like to do, there is a link underneath. But I'm just going to finish by kind of saying one last time, good night, Orca.